everybody. We are live. It looks like officially now. Welcome. We are currently recovering still from our busy weekend at Puppy Summit. It was a ton of fun. And we wanted to jump on before our holiday season kind of takes a hold of us and talk about some things that we need to keep in mind as our holiday season approaches. This is Thanksgiving as well as all of our December holidays. We want to make sure that we're doing what we can to help set our dogs up for success. Obviously, that is going to help us as human caregivers reduce stress, reduce some of that chaos that can come with family in the home and four-footers running around. And then talk about some safety concerns as well, because with the holidays coming up, there are some things that we do need to keep in mind, some things that could be potential dangers, both physically and emotionally for our pets. So I'm going to go through some of the common things that we encounter with Thanksgiving, along with a variety of different ways that you might be enjoying your holiday. And as we go through these things, if you guys do have questions about your own setups or your own Thanksgiving plans, please feel free to drop those in the comments and we'll get to them before our time is done today. So the first thing that I want to talk about is if you're planning on completely leaving town. This is without your dog. Sometimes we can think, oh, well, we're just going to prepare ourselves and then our dog is going to go somewhere, someone's going to come take care of our dog. As much as possible, keeping routines the same will really be helpful for your pet. So if you do have kind of a day-to-day routine, including enrichment and exercise, it's a nice thing to let your pet sitter know so that they can try to replicate that. And that's going to help your dog feel safe and comfortable. If you are planning on leaving, I always like to prepare my pet sitter with some enrichment items, maybe some stuffables that are ready in the freezer that they can give. Maybe you leave on some classical music for them or leave them with instructions on how to turn that on so they can give your pet a little additional relaxation and enrichment during the day. If you're planning on bringing your pet to a daycare or boarding facility, then same rules apply. Bring along some familiars, bedding, toys that the dog feels comfortable with. Some facilities will even stuff puzzles for you, so bring along that Kong and see if they'll put that food in there instead of just in a plain bowl. Again, just a nice way to kind of add a little enrichment. Now, if you notice that your pet is getting a little nervous as you're starting to pack luggage, this isn't terribly uncommon. What I would recommend is try to increase food reinforcement for calm behaviors. So if you feel like your puppy or dog is getting a little clingy, I ask for a known behavior like go to place or settle on a mat and offer some additional food reinforcement in that area as I start to pack things up. This can help kind of promote a little calmness and relaxation. If you know your dog gets stressed out when they start to see your luggage, don't be afraid to have one of you out in the backyard, playing or go for a walk, and then pack those suitcases when your dog might not see it, and that can just help reduce some of that stress. Now, for a lot of us, we're going to be home with our dogs this holiday season, whether I am, headed out for a day trip to visit some local family or even having family over. So my game plan is going to look a little different. The one thing that is going to remain the same is that we want to make sure that the day before and morning of, we're getting our dogs out for a little bit of activity. This could be a long line walk in the park, a long line walk on a nature trail, giving your dog lots of opportunities for both sniffing, relieving themselves and taking care of business, as well as some physical exercise. Because all of this is going to be needed if we expect our puppies or our dogs to relax for long periods of time, either while we're away or while there's activity going on at the home. If I'm leaving my pets for the day and maybe heading off for a couple hours to visit family, I always like to leave them with food reinforcement in the form of enrichment. So something safe that you've tested before. I don't want to leave my dog with a licky mat and peanut butter if they've never had that under supervision, because we don't want them, ripping it apart and eating pieces. So instead, I'm going to go with something like a topple or a Kong that I know the dog has had before. Make sure that you've closed extra doors, covered trash bins. There's no food on the counters. Around this time when we're cooking and bringing food over to family for kind of potluck events, we might have some extra stuff hanging around as we get busy and stressed and cook. So make sure that you're keeping a close eye on that and putting all of that away. If you need to, use crates, X-Pens, baby gates to help block off areas that maybe are a little messier than we intended and we didn't get to. Because the last thing we want is while you're away, your dog getting into something, either from the trash or off the counters, because not only is that not a good behavior that we want them rehearsing, but it also could include some things that are toxic for them or things that they could ingest that could cause an intestinal blockage. So help your dogs be successful by thinking ahead of time, cleaning up, and of course, using management when needed. I do like to leave on some classical music while I'm away. Helps promote relaxation and helps kind of drown out external noises that might wake the dogs up. For them, they don't know this is a holiday. It's just like any other day where I might leave for work for a couple hours and come home. So keeping that routine the same, but maybe adding in a little extra activity beforehand to help drain that energy will help them be successful. Now, the big one we got to think about is if we're having other people over to our house, whether that's people they've seen before or people they haven't. And everybody's dog is going to be a little different. Of course, we love for our dogs to be engaged in all of our activities whenever possible. You know, I take my dogs a lot of fun places with me because I enjoy that. But there are some circumstances where it just makes more sense to have the dogs put away. So if I'm having a really large party or a really large family gathering, for some dogs that are really, really excitable, this means lots of opportunities for jumping up, which maybe my dog isn't ready for, and I don't want them jumping on people all day. For our dogs who are a little softer in temperament or maybe reactive, this could be extremely overwhelming for them. And I don't want my dog to be in stress all day long. For our puppies, depending on how, confident or outgoing they are, this too could be overwhelming. Remember that whatever behaviors our dogs rehearse become more normal. And if you're working on a manners training program, the last thing we want is your dog spending all day long jumping up, biting, and getting into things they shouldn't. The other thing we need to think about with all of these people coming over is the door opening and closing and people not keeping an eye on your pet. This is really common because as we all get together for the holidays, oh, let me grab that from the car, I forgot it. I open the door. And if I'm not used to living in your home, maybe I don't have dogs, I'm not used to kind of blocking that threshold, and then we could get dogs that accidentally run out. So management's going to be key, and it might mean an X-pen around the door. It might mean a baby gate in the laundry room to keep the dog in the laundry room. Maybe it's a dog in a crate in the bedroom and the door closed. There's a variety of options. What I recommend is that you consider where you are in your training program and how comfortable your dog might be with all of these activities. The other thing to remember is that you're going to be busy. So it might make more sense for you to also have the dog away so that you don't have to supervise the dog, maybe supervise the dog and children. Now, there are some ways that we can incorporate the dog for short periods of time. Maybe if you have a big dinner party, everybody's sitting down and eating, the dog's in an X-pen or crate with some form of enrichment while that's going on. And then as the party starts to dwindle and you have fewer guests, maybe that's a nice time to bring the dog out and there's fewer people that you have to manage, less activity, which might be a little easier and more doable for your dog. So keep that in mind as well, that smaller parties, fewer people means it's easier for you to communicate. Please ignore my dog when he jumps up. And it's easier for you to supervise your dog amongst all of the activity. Now, we also want to make sure that our home is going to be conducive for good behavior. If I have a big, pretty dinner table that's set up, we certainly might want to keep the dog completely separated from that area. As you guys are eating food, make sure that nobody is feeding the dog from the table. Not because I worry about the dog begging, we'll address that in just a second, but because a lot of the food that we are eating is heavily seasoned. It's also going to be high in fat. And so a lot of these foods are actually really dangerous for our dogs. They can even be toxic for our dogs. And depending on what we give them might result in an emergency vet visit, which is the last thing we want to be doing on a holiday. So some things that we want to avoid when it comes to food. We definitely want to exclude any sweets, alcohol. We want to exclude high fats. So, chicken fat, chicken skin, turkey, same as well. We want to avoid a lot of oils and spicy seasonings. You can find lists that are pretty extensive on foods that are dog safe, what I always recommend to clients, instead of, taking some leftovers and giving it to your dog, which could be dangerous, instead find some of those good dog safe food items and put them aside before you start cooking. So as I'm chopping up some carrots or fresh peas or green beans, maybe some turkey before it's been cooked, maybe some diced sweet potato before I blend it with the cream, right? A lot of these whole foods that are just cooked are great for your dogs. We can introduce them in small doses to make sure that it's not going to upset any GI systems. But those are great things to add to food bowls and to puzzle toys to kind of help add some variety, increase that value. So those are things that we do add, but again, it's going to be pre-seasoned. I don't want all those seasonings and fats in there. Now, if you do decide to have your dog around with you during the day with some of this activity, maybe you've only got a couple people coming over, it's going to be a little quieter. One thing we want to make sure is that we have pet identification tags on our dogs. Again, the door is going to be opening and closing, and I want to make sure that my dog's not going to run out and get lost. You might even find that having your dog on leash or having your dog in an X pen nearby kind of helps you keep an eye on them as the dog's primary caregiver. I also want to have some pet safe snacks that are lying around, maybe in my pocket, in a treat bag, or in some treat stations around the house. And I want you guys to work on some training while you have some friends over. You want to work on things like 4 on the floor, right? Anytime your dog goes up and says hi to someone and stays on the ground, you can verbally mark that with a yes, and then walk over and pay them. I also really love to reward station behaviors. So go to place, settle on a mat. Anytime your dog has found their place of relaxation, it's a really nice thing to go ahead and just reward them for it so that they're understanding that calm and quiet is what's going to get them reinforcement with all of that activity going on. I also am going to pay quiet, especially if I've got a vocal dog, so that the dog isn't barking over people or getting too excited. You also might want to have some additional enrichment prepared for them. Some extra stuffed Kongs or topples, maybe a food puzzle, maybe a bully stick or a trachea. These are nice things to have around so that you can be giving your dogs activities to do throughout the day, just like you might give a kid a coloring book, right? It's something that's going to keep them busy, keep them occupied, and you know that if they're sitting there working on that puzzle, not only are they getting rewarded for calm and quiet behavior, but you can keep an eye on them, and it's going to prevent some of that undesired behavior from happening and getting reinforcement. Because food is very tempting, and lots of our dogs, especially our younger dogs, really enjoy counter surfing. Again, this is a normal dog behavior. Dogs are curious and opportunistic, and if they smell something that's interesting, they're going to jump up and check it out. So try to help set your dog up for success, again, because a lot of these food items are dangerous for our dogs. So an X pen around your kitchen, or when you guys sit down to eat and adults are not in the kitchen supervising the dog can go in a crate with an activity to do. And these different rotations of management can kind of help you keep track of your dog throughout the day, make sure they're not getting into anything that they shouldn't be, and keep them busy. And remember that at the end of the day, if you start feeling overwhelmed, if you feel like your dog or your puppy is not rehearsing behaviors that you want them to be, don't be afraid to grab your puppy, put a leash on, walk outside for a quick potty break, and then put them down for a nap. Again, that activity that you engaged in the morning before everybody came over is going to be that outlet that they need to help keep them calm and quiet. So turn on some music in a bedroom, give them a frozen Kong in the crate, close the door, turn the lights off. They can have a nice nap while you are hanging out with friends. Don't be afraid to do that. You have a right to enjoy the holiday too. And again, your dog doesn't necessarily know that they are missing out. So as we're leading up to this holiday, there are some things that it's a really good idea for you to start preparing your dog for now. Even if your dog is older and well-mannered, go ahead and grab some treats, do 3 to 5 minute mini training sessions once or twice a day, and brush your dog up on some of these skills that they're going to need on our Thanksgiving holiday. That includes things like attention grabbers. So whether you use a positive interrupter or something like the name game, we want to make sure we can easily capture our dog's attention if we notice that they're starting to get too close to those counters, or if we notice that maybe they're bothering one of our guests a little more than we'd like them to. That positive interrupter gives you a way to grab their attention, move them away from that distraction, and then you can redirect your dog to something else. That leads us to a recall, right? If we've got our dog's attention, we also need a way to be able to move them away from that distraction. I really like to use my hand target for that. So I'd grab my dog's attention, Lennon, show him my hand here. He'd come over and target my hand. And then my dog is with me. So then I can tell him what he's allowed to be doing instead of what he was just doing. And that could be go to place or settle on a mat. Again, if that skill isn't super strong, I might have an X pen around that settle mat just to help add that layer of management to reward the dog. And then while the dog's relaxing on the bed, I can either give them a puzzle toy or a bully stick if I'm going to be distracted. And if I'm able to do a little training, then I might just give them a normal toy or antler, and I'm periodically going to reinforce them for hanging out quietly on their bed inside that X-penned area. And then you're doing training, but we've also got that management there to help prevent those undesired behaviors from happening. It's also a great idea to brush up on that recall through thresholds. So just like we work on attention and hand targets to get a dog away from a distraction, like the countertops, I also want to practice that moving through my front door if I'm planning on having people come in and out through that doorway. Oftentimes that front door is super exciting, and the only time they're moving through it is when they're on a walk, and they then get to go explore and run around. So this can be really exciting if somebody opens your door on Thanksgiving and your dog's like, I'm free. They just take off running, right? So you want to make sure that you've got that kind of practiced in a structured session. So I love to grab a leash, and I'll actually clip a long line on the dog. This is something you very easily could tie into your normal walking routine over the next couple of days. And what you're going to do is you're going to work on a wait at the doorway. So we work on a sit, stay, or wait, which means no forward motion. I'm going to open the door. Eye contact to me gets a okay, and they're allowed to move through the door. And the second they're out that threshold, I'm immediately calling their name, Lennon, and then recall here and having him come back inside the house. And I mark that hand target and drop a couple treats on the ground to close the door again. And then that way that becomes a bit of a pattern. And it's a pattern that you are reinforcing so that day of, if your dog accidentally does sneak out that front door, they've got a little bit of a booster there on that behavior of coming back to you through that front. So these are things to start thinking about. Start thinking about now where people are going to be sitting, how many people you're having over, what kind of energy level and excitement might be taking place. And the other thing you need to think about is, where is my dog in their training program? If they are a baby, I need to have really low expectations about what they're going to be able to do during this time. If they're older and we've been working hard on manners and they're confident and comfortable with friends and guests, that might be a great time for you to get a little extra training in with distractions. But if you've got that rambunctious teenager that is nonstop jumping up on people, trying to get out the door, jumping up on counters, you might decide that that's a little more effort than you're able to deal with in the moment, or it's a little more activity than your dog is prepared to handle. So again, that's when I like to think about, is this really fair for the dog? Are they able to handle this? Oftentimes the answer, especially for a teenager, is probably no. So in that circumstance, I'm going to do a little more activity in the morning and then allow them to take a nap and hang out. And, they can come down for a couple potty breaks, maybe a quick greet to a few people on leash, short little walk, and then back upstairs. And then remember to make sure you're cleaning up after all of your friends and family leave. I know how exhausting having a bunch of people over can be, but you'll want to make sure that everything is completely cleared and put away, solid, lids on things, food back in the fridge before we allow our dog to kind of resume that normal free rein behavior. Again, making sure that we're doing what we can to prevent any emergency situations from happening. Not a bad idea too. I am a big fan of doing this when I travel with my dog. I always like to look for the nearest emergency 24-hour veterinary hospital for those just in case moments. So if you know that you're going to have a bunch of people over, want to kind of check all your boxes, it's not a bad idea to check out where your local veterinary hospital might be. And I will also caution you that right now they are very full. So it really is going to be in your best interest to make sure we're avoiding having to use their services. So if you guys have questions about your Thanksgiving routine, about what might be suitable or realistic for training and management for your dog, please feel free to drop those into the comments. I will continue to monitor this thread throughout the day to make sure that we can get you guys some good tips to make sure that your pets are safe. And of course, that we're continuing to build all of those good manners, because we spend a lot of time with our dogs and we really do want this good relationship and we want these nice, strong behaviors. And so it's important for us as people to make sure that we're deciding which environments are going to be conducive to good behavior, where they can be successful. And if I think this might be a little too much for my dog, again, don't be afraid to do a little exercise ahead of time and then put your pet away for some safety. Now, the one thing that I didn't talk about that I do want to bring up is kids. Lots of families, maybe hosts, will be having kids come over. If your dog has not been around kids before, quite frankly, even if your dog has been around kids before, remember that not all kids are the same. Just because my dog likes my kids doesn't mean my dog's going to like somebody else's kids. The other thing we need to keep in mind is that not all kids, especially if they don't live with dogs, they don't necessarily know how they should interact with dogs in a safe and appropriate manner. Whenever kids are around, I always recommend clients use management. I always recommend barriers, and I always recommend 100% supervision. So one of the hosting adults will need to be responsible for the kid and dog interactions. It shouldn't, be dependent on another parent. It's your dog, it's your home, it's your responsibility to keep everybody safe. And this includes your dog, because a lot of times, even though kids mean well and they love dogs, they can interact with dogs in a manner that's inappropriate, that can be really, really stressful for our dogs. And at the end of the day, we have to remember that our dogs are animals. And if they feel stressed out, they're going to react. And sometimes that reaction can include their teeth. So we want to make sure that we're not putting our dogs in that situation where they need to. Even if another adult that's coming over to your home has kids and has dogs, I never expect other people to know what my dog needs. Again, that is my responsibility. So in those environments, if I feel like I cannot 100% supervise, if my dog has not been around a lot of kids, if my dog does not currently live with kids, if I'm going to have a lot of people and there's going to be a lot of activity and kids, those are always environments where it often is best to let your dog skip this holiday and go hang out quietly in an office, in a bedroom. If your dog is not already crate trained, then I'd recommend getting them used to, being away from you in the home. You might even put an extra sign on the door that says "Do not enter," so that we make sure that no one accidentally opens that door and lets the dogs out. So again, if you guys have questions, please feel free to drop those in the comments. I'll continue to monitor this. But our theme for Thanksgiving is that we all want to be safe, humans and dogs. So as our caregivers to our dogs, sometimes this means that we're having to think ahead. It means we're having to refresh our dog on some manners, and we're having to kind of make those tough calls on what might be realistic for our dogs to do, and when it's best for our dog to sit this one out. And no matter what solution you come to, you don't need to feel like a bad dog mom for putting your dog away. Sometimes that's the best thing for them. So I hope that helps you guys kind of think ahead and prepare about this upcoming holiday. Again, if you have questions, let me know. All right, guys, have a great day.